News First starts now.
Another day slammed by Ian. Unbelievable images showing exactly what those families are now dealing with. Today's storm is a mess. Our Atlanta News First crew capturing this video showing people using a raft to paddle through the streets of historic Charleston.
Well, things have thankfully calmed down pretty significantly, too. That's great, as Ian has now been downgraded from a hurricane, but still the damage is done.
In Florida, we're now getting reports that more than 20 people have died from the storm. Rescue operations still underway with many areas. Coverage right now. Patrick Quinn continues his reporting from Florida's Gulf Coast. But first, Adam Murphy joins us live in Charleston.
Well, good evening, guys. I'll tell you what, we can see the damage now that the storm has moved through. I'm wading through about a foot of water right here. The road is underwater, and so is the park next door. And down the way, you may see some kids. This is their version of a after something behind that bicycle, but it's been something all day out here. In fact, Charleston PD reported 24 close. Relentless rain and wild wind gusts created havoc on the 60 miles per hour, dumping several inches of rain in just a couple of hours, right around 1 or 2 o'clock this afternoon. And while most people hunkered down inside their homes, we did spot a few guys that the floodwater was a few feet deep in some of the low-lying areas. And still, locals here that we spoke with tell us that as bad as it
cold, so you kind of feel a little bit of those gusts where your house starts shaking.
We're just trying to make the best out of a unfortunate situation.
Yeah, and right here on Ashley Street in Charleston, as I mentioned, the water is covering the roadway and down through Halsey Street as well. We're just off Calhoun Street, if you're familiar with recede. In fact, back here, look, it's up right next to some of the homes. That's a real problem, especially if any of these old homes have basement areas. But how much that damage is, and it's going to take some time, at least a day or two, before they can get the water down and take a good look at the damage. News First.
And Adam from South Carolina. Now let's take a view at the extent of the damage from this deadly storm in Florida. It's really hard to put into words, but this is the aftermath of a storm with 150-mile-per-hour winds. That you turn up, down, left, right, damage, trees, power lines, all of it down. CBS 40 out the storm. Clearly, it is not going to be a quick cleanup.
Absolutely not. You mentioned the destruction, and Sean, you also mentioned how deadly this storm is proving to be. More than 20 deaths so far from Hurricane Ian, and the majority of those deaths were here in Charlotte County. We're now in Port Charlotte, and it has certainly affected the business community as well. You mentioned those winds, 150+ miles per hour, and that's the effects of them. Now, from talking with residents here on the ground today, they said here in Port Charlotte, to get back, we need two things. We need gas, we need power. 80% of this county still without power. A lot of crews are on the ground. In terms of gas, take a look. This gas station, it's gone. This is part of the problem. They're trying to rush who live in this area, but I mean, stations are absolutely in Port Charlotte. We were in Fort Myers yesterday, and complete communities are gone. We were just in a community in Northport. 80% of their homes. Bill, a man named Bill, he took me on his golf cart all through this community and showed the level of devastation, and you're seeing it's affecting the business community and those who live here, and yes, it will take weeks for them to recover.
Thank you. Here at home, we sure did get lucky, didn't we? The storm could have just as easily barreled through metro Atlanta. Instead, right now, First Alert Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Valdez now in the new Weather Center. I like this. Very nice place you've got here. This kind of storm.
The Gulf Coast and the Atlantic coast, and we did get very lucky because early models did have the storm moving straight through North Georgia. That possibility of tornadoes, heavy downpours, and strong winds. Instead, that storm is tracking through the Carolinas. That although some of those outer bands may briefly clip far eastern Georgia with some clouds, a little bit of a breeze, and even some impacts have been and will be minimal. We have seen some gusty winds from time to time in far east Georgia, and that is why we've been under a wind advisory. That expires in the next 2 hours at about 8 o'clock. That's just where we could see some gusty winds associated with those outer rain bands, but overall the winds really haven't been that strong. Tonight will be chilly, so if you are heading out on this Friday night, I would grab a light jacket if you're cold-natured. Tomorrow morning as you wake up, temperatures will be cooler than they were last night, dropping down to 54 in Atlanta. Last night was in the 60s. Tomorrow, partly cloudy skies, 20 with a high of 75. Big question, will it stay this nice on Sunday? We'll talk more about that in the rest of the 7.
And now to the story that everybody's talking about. New insights found burned and wrapped up in a tarp. Debbie Collier is her name. Revealing a little bit more about how they think she ended up dead. Let's give you the backstory. Collier was last seen alive inside this family dog. Investigators say the mom of two waited in her van in the parking lot. Collier's daughter Amanda says her mom sent her a Venmo payment more than had been taken. Well, today's update is that no one has been ruled out as a suspect, and police say this was not some random killing.
We do not believe that this is a random act of violence. We do not believe that this is the act of a serial killer. We believe that this act was deliberate and personal. Please understand that this case is very complex in nature. It is going to take significantly more time than the 19 days that have passed since the discovery. Wrapped up in an hour. Habersham County Sheriff's Office asking businesses along Georgia 15 from Clayton to Lula Falls to 11th.
New jobs for hard-working Georgians. They are now in jeopardy. Electric car maker Rivian hoping to build a new plant just east.
Could put that whole plan in doubt. Atlanta News First's Rachel Aragon live in Atlanta with what all this means. Rachel.
Previously said they hope to bring around 7,500 new jobs to the state of Georgia, but we might not see those new jobs anytime soon, thanks to a new ruling from a judge out of Morgan County. East of Atlanta, with the capacity to produce 400. Those plans could be on pause.
We had a hearing. The judge took evidence, took testimony.
A Morgan County Superior Judge has directly impacting the economic development agreement between the four counties.
Court ruled that this project is just not going to be entitled to subsidization from the taxpayers of the three counties.
Of the bond money, Christie argues the property tax breaks offered to Riv, the $15 billion in bonds are not, quote, sound, feasible, or reasonable, and the Joint Development Authority has not put forward welfare within the territory of the authority.
All they have to do is just go ahead and build a plant if they wanted to, and with their own money, with a loan. Wanted to have this pilot program, which was a very big subsidization by the taxpayers of these three counties.
Despite this new ruling, they still plan to bring jobs to Georgia and see this project through completion with Rivian. We're live in downtown Atlanta. Rachel Aragon.
Who was loved, but fentanyl took her life. Hear from the 18-year-old's family about what they say will change the tide in the fight against fentanyl.
You're watching Atlanta News First. More of the story.
Dangerous drug. An 18-year-old Georgia woman whose family wants you to know was more than just a statistic.
Yeah, I mean, as a parent, and tonight, Kaylee's family is still in shock. But they're taking all of those difficult and painful emotions and they're trying to turn them into action. They're trying to get fentanyl off the streets, just as fentanyl deaths here in Georgia are way up.
There were only 4 fentanyl overdoses among Georgia teens. In 2020, that number, it jumped to 14. That's an 800% increase. Atlanta News First reporter Sawyer Bussey has the story. Here's more.
Since Kaylee Boxer can't be here,
allows me to see her.
Her mom meets her here.
Her baby book, one of her baby
existing here in the dining room. The table is covered in Kaylee's life and her death.
And sunflowers were her favorite flowers. We have a little thing with dragonflies that's engraved. This is little dear mom and dads. And
Kaylee Boxer died.
This is where I found her.
Authorities say Kaylee died after ingesting a lethal dose of fentanyl. The case of Narcan Kaylee's dad used to try and help his daughter the morning he found her body is still
6 years ago. I never thought
Bakarich sold Kaylee the drugs that killed her. He's been charged putting whoever sold Kaylee the drugs that killed her behind bars.
I think the legacy that she leaves behind is like the love that she had for
Here and bring in First Alert meteorologist Jennifer Valdez and Fred Campagna. What a
all week long, massive storm, and the change in the forecast for us here in North Georgia as the week went on.
Yeah, and Fred's going to have more on those impacts. But first, let's talk about what it's doing here in North Georgia, and that's a whole lot of nothing. We are minimal impacts the rest of tonight. A little breezy in East Georgia. We may see rain is falling, and that is over South Carolina and North Carolina. It did make landfall with 85-mile-an-hour winds just after 2 o'clock this afternoon near Georgetown, South Carolina. It's moving north, and it will bands bringing just a few little sprinkles across far eastern Georgia. That is all we will see as we head through tonight. The possibility of a few showers east of Atlanta. But when you look at the metro, we are actually going to see mostly clear skies tonight, and it will be dry. Outside right now, we're in the upper 70s right now. Little breezy. We do have 14 to 15-mile-an-hour winds right now, where we do have the possibility of some still under a wind advisory until 8 o'clock, but the winds have not been. 8 o'clock may be a little breezy at times tonight and tomorrow, but only a 20% chance of rain. Again, that's east of Atlanta in East Georgia compared to where they were last night. So a little bit of a chill is about 61. Instead, we'll be in the 50s. Then a beautiful mid-70s in the afternoon. That is a far cry from what happened. From Ian, let's head over to meteorologist Fred Campagna.
A historic storm, Jen. Gusts. Look at some of the top wind gusts in Florida, all well Coast, Cape Coral, Punta Gorda, 124 miles an hour, 110 for Grove City. The last two, those are on the Carolina coast. Of course, Georgetown, where it made landfall, 60 miles per hour. The rain, it was Central Florida that got the lion's share of the rain. 17.
No rain in the 7-day forecast.
Looking good. Thank you, Jen. Well, it all comes down to this. Braves fans flocking to Truist Park for a series with the Mets that will most likely determine who.
South Carolina, our only impact, a 20% chance of a shower early tomorrow in East Georgia. Otherwise, we've got beautiful weather after tomorrow. No rain in the 7-day forecast.
Looking good. Thank you, Jen. Well, it all comes down to this. Braves fans flocking to Truist Park for a series with the Mets that will most likely determine who wins the division. We're live at the park less than an hour before the first pitch. Don't go away.
More coverage first from where you live. From Athens to Atlanta, your first alert is on Atlanta News First. We are the local news team that puts you first.
Come on, admit it. You're one of those Braves fans that are just itching for a back-to-back World Series title.
Well, one of the teams that wants to keep that from happening is right here in Atlanta for a 3-game set starting tonight. Atlanta News First Sports Director Fred Khalil live at Truist Park. Hey, Fred.
Hey, Rick, you know, this is always great. Anytime it's the Braves and the Mets. And this series is big. You know, you could tell it was big because it's cleared out now. But earlier this afternoon, late afternoon, this place was packed with media. Out. So this is a very, very big series because the Braves come into the tonight. It's an all-star pitching matchup. Jacob deGrom coming back from an injury, and he's been pitching well so far, and Max Fried. So we're looking for in October. I know tomorrow is October 1st, but Paul Bird knows this rivalry runs deep. You're talking about a Braves-Mets rivalry. For the Braves, Birdie, I remember those late 90s going into then Shea Stadium and Chipper Jones and everything. It was crazy.
Got called up at Shea Stadium because he was so good. He would laugh, but I mean, I'm telling you, it got intense. So it was like Chipper, Chipper. It wasn't actually Chipper, so he would harass them back. Chipper retired, the Mets saluted to him, and, you know, we're all over his.
Well, you know, the Hawks held one final practice today. Exhibition games against the Milwaukee Bucks. And one guy, I think all Hawks fans, I know I'm backcourt with Trae Young. And, you know, right now, from things that we hear, DeJounte Murray seems to be a great fit. For now, we're live at Truist Park looking forward this weekend, and we'll have highlights coming up at 11 o'clock.
I love it. What perfect weather. We were a little scared about the forecast for the Braves. No impact. The only chance of rain in the entire 7-day forecast is a 20% chance of rain.